Guys, give me 10 seconds. At some point, I want you guys to go down in the description below and check out my Twitch channel. If you aren't followed, you guys are missing out. On to the video. What is going on, everyone? It is MDog5, and I am so happy to bring to you this video. My chair's a little squeaky. That should be better. So today, the Xbox Series S trailer is announced. Now, I was so excited to see the Xbox Series S, you know, just 4K, 120 frames per second compacted in that tiny box, right? It's probably going to be cheaper. You still get the 4K experience. And if PlayStation doesn't do anything like that, I'm just saying, I might be getting a Series X. I'm just saying. But then, after I saw that trailer, I scrolled down and I saw this Age of Calamity trailer, and I was like, huh? Today, I guess we're going to be discussing what Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity means for the franchise, what it means for the Breath of the Wild sequel, and then after we discuss that, we are going to do a little trailer breakdown, so to say. So, what does this mean for the series of Zelda? So, first off, we know that there were some rumors that speculated a Nintendo Switch Pro to be released within 2021 or 2022. These leaks aren't really viable. However, EGI and Numa just announced that they need more time to create this vast Breath of the Wild sequel world. Maybe they need a new console to do so, right? So, with a year of the fans being left in the dark from the initial announcement of the trailer, they decided to drop this game, okay? So, when or if the Nintendo Switch Pro or Nintendo Switch successor does release, expect this game, expect Breath of the Wild, and if the Breath of the Wild sequel does drop on the Nintendo Switch, expect all three of those games to be on the Nintendo Switch Pro or Nintendo Switch successor. That's number one. So this is a spin-off game, and it is used not to deter, but to bide some time for this sequel to release. So the fact that this game is coming out nearly 4 years after the initial release of the first Breath of the Wild, and the fact that it is used to bide Nintendo some more time for the Nintendo Switch sequel just shows how big the game is going to be. Like, this game is going to be insane. So now I know that this is not a Breath of the Wild game per se. It is a Hyrule Warriors game. But there are some things, there are little pieces of context that you can gather from this game, which will then allow you to possibly fill in some gaps with the new game. Yeah, my point is that the mechanics that are in this game will not be the same mechanics in the Breath of the Wild sequel. Because this is a prequel, perhaps that might be one reason, but also you don't want to like make everything original, you know, you want to create new things. You want to keep the player, you know, surprised with some of the new things that are added in the game. So obviously the Breath of the Wild 2 or the Breath of the Wild sequel will not have the same mechanics. That being said, although this is not a Breath of the Wild game, this is a Breath of the Wild game, if you know what I mean. So there are a bunch of new moves that were added. Maybe it is to fit the game style or because, you know, this is like a 1 versus 100, 1 versus 1,000 kind of game. But of course, there were some new mechanics, period. This is all based off of Breath of the Wild. There are all these new mechanics in this game, you know, and it is basically guaranteed, you know, in order to keep things fresh, that these new mechanics will not be in the Breath of the Wild sequel, because that is yet to even be released, right? We only got the announcement that it was in production, okay? So with all that being said, right, possibly Breath of the Wild 2 can be put on the Nintendo Switch Pro. Possibly it'll come out in 2021 on the Nintendo Switch. if it does come out on the Nintendo Switch, expect all 3 of these games to be on the successor of the Nintendo Switch or the Nintendo Switch Pro, whatever it may be. Expect these 2 or these 3 Breath of the Wild Zelda games to come out on that system. Okay? Definitely. Actually, expect all of them, because if the Nintendo Switch successor, Nintendo Switch Pro, I mean, if it doesn't come out on the Switch, it's obviously going to come out on the successor. So they're already putting new Mario games, old Mario games, and everything, just all these Mario games on the Nintendo Switch. So trust me, they will do the same for Zelda, so everybody can get the same experience. So Breath of the Wild 2 is obviously going to be the main game on the Nintendo Switch successor. That's what we'll call it at this point. And people are obviously going to want to play the first Breath of the Wild on the successor. They're not going to want to go out and buy a whole Nintendo Switch just to play a previous game, you know. So just expect this game and Breath of the Wild to be on this Nintendo Switch successor. All right. That is what we can gather on the Nintendo Switch successor based off of Age of Calamity. But now let's get into the nitty-gritty trailer. So the opening scene starts off with the same sort of storytelling visual that Breath of the Wild carries out, the same one that King Rome and Impa laid out to us in the first game. We're seeing official Breath of the Wild visuals that was in the first game right now, and then you see King Rome saying, I think it's time for you to discover what happened 100 years ago and whatnot. So this game might, just might, be taking place in a flashback. Maybe not. I will say this though, this looks like a professionally fan-made game which was licensed by the initial developer, meaning you're gonna have all this new context in the perspective of a fan. So what I mean by that is that you'll have the Lizalfos, Moblin, Bokoblins all together in one horde. Then you'll have like the Yiga clan fighting against the Gerudo and all that. So you have that aspect. And then as we get further along the trailer, we sort of see kind of story mode aspects. And we see this because we see single player fights like Zelda versus the Lionel and Mipha versus the Guardian. Anyways, back to the trailer, we see that the Hyrule Castle is flooded with malice and it's supposed to represent Ganon's return, which we'll touch more on by the end of this breakdown. So the trailer becomes spontaneous after this point, but as I said, it's just a mix between the story element of the game and the 1 versus 100, 1 versus 1000 gameplay sort of the game. So right here we see a restored Hyrule and this whole fleet of enemies, and there's a couple things going on in this. So I want you guys to take away 3 initial things from this shot right here. We see a bunch of foot soldiers, which means that we will have friendlies. Then we see the cannons, which might be an optimizable aspect of the game. Maybe you can change the firepower or the field elements that will, you know, assist you alongside your fight. Just know that you will have assistance during your fights. Now, I say all this because it is a common occurrence amongst the trailers. So we have Ubersa fighting the Yiga alongside other female Gerudo soldiers. Now, you may be thinking, not all of the champions are going at it with their respective soldiers. Now, yes, remember when I said that there was 2 elements of this, the story element and the 1 versus 100 typical Hyrule Warrior gameplay sort of element of this game. So, we see the other champions like Daruk, like Revali, like Mipha going at it alone, right? But if you notice, they are each outside of their own respective villages or respective territories. And the fact that not Revali, but Daruk and Mipha are doing something alone outside of their territories, having a one-on fight with our, you know, typical monsters, our typical bosses, that leads me to believe that that is sort of the story, and that section or segment of the game is there so that the player can get used to that respective character. We know that all the champions will have different sets of moves, different pros, different cons, which is why we see Rivali using the bomb arrow against the horde of enemies, and that might be why he's going solo, so the player can get used to his playstyle. We know that Daruk conjures rocks and whatnot, which is why he's fighting a larger Phoenix. And yeah, so of course, we see Link going at it with his foot soldiers, with artillery in the battlefield, and he has his own respective moves. We also see the same thing with Ubersa. So this leads me to believe that all of the characters will be able to do that. And since there is a shot of all of the champions standing amongst one another, I believe that you can intertwine characters once you've unlocked them. For example, in this Hyrule field, maybe you can play as Rivali, maybe you can play as Ubersa. Once the game is finished, once you do what you got to do and whatnot, I feel like you can be able to intertwine characters for different respective missions. And the third thing that I wanted you guys to get from it is look at the field. This is Hyrule Field. Now, Breath of the Wild is known for being an open world game, but how open world will this be? I guess we're gonna have to find out. Now, of course, we see the Moblin acting as a Moblin, knocking the other Bokoblins out of its way, similar to how it would pick up Bokoblins and throw them at you in Breath of the Wild. Now, this leads me to believe that all of the enemies will have their own attack patterns and, of course, mind of its own. We don't want to stray too far away from Breath of the Wild. Now we see this shot of a seemingly friendly battle between Link and Rivali. This is most likely story mode inclination, and it will most likely be a cutscene. Now I just want to point out the fact that Rivali is doing the most as usual, similar to how he walked up in front of all the champions in that one shot. Little prick. Now the rest of the trailer goes from story, gameplay, story, as you just saw. But the real thing that I wanted to touch upon before we leave is the dark side of this game. Now, we are, of course, going to get more insight and more clarity on what exactly happened to the champions, how they died, how Link was sealed away. This can be suggested because of Zelda's last words, "I must protect everyone," and, of course, how the castle went from dirty, malice-filled to clean and pure. And of course, that was a reverse shot. So yes, we do see how the Guardians turn on Mipha and whatnot. And I believe that was where Mipha was. Like, that's where she was heading, according to the story, because the five champions split up to different sections of Hyrule. So yes, this is going to give us a lot more clarity in what Breath of the Wild failed to provide. Other than that, guys, that'll wrap up the video. Let me know what you guys think. If I missed anything, let me know in the comments down below. But don't think I missed Link catching that shock arrow and the new friendly Guardian at the end of the trailer. All right. We'll get more information about this game September 26th. And of course, I'll cover more then. It'll most likely just be more gameplay, or the official gameplay trailer. And yeah, Call of Duty is getting announced tomorrow, so expect a video on that sometime soon. I love you all. Again, make sure to check out my Twitch, and I will see you all next time.